He stood in the middle of a city that had just vanished in a flash. The air, on fire, the sky, black, thousands of people, gone in seconds. Somehow, he survived. But just when he thought the worst was over, something even more unthinkable happened. Something no one on Earth was prepared for. What if I told you there's a man who lived through both atomic bombs dropped on Japan? And I'm not talking about someone who heard about it or saw it from a distance. I'm talking about someone who was literally at ground zero, twice. Someone who felt the heat, saw the flash, and walked through the aftermath, twice. His name was Tsutomu Yamaguchi, and for decades, absolutely no one believed his story. Before we dive into this incredible tale of survival against impossible odds, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to hear will completely change how you think about luck, fate, and the power of human resilience. Alright, let's start from the beginning. It's August 1945, and 29-year-old Tsutomu Yamaguchi is wrapping up what should have been a routine business trip. He works as a naval engineer for Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, and he's been in Hiroshima for 3 months designing oil tankers. Pretty normal stuff, right? August 6th, his last day in the city. He's walking to the train station with 2 colleagues, probably thinking about getting home to his wife and baby son in Nagasaki. Just another Monday morning commute, you know. Now here's where things get absolutely insane. At exactly 8:15 a.m., Yamaguchi realizes he forgot his travel documents back at the office. So he turns around to go get them. His colleagues keep walking toward the station. That decision to turn around, it saved his life and almost killed him at the same time. Because at 8:15 and 17 seconds, little boy detonated 1,900 feet above Hiroshima. The first flash. Yamaguchi later described what happened next, and honestly, it sounds like something out of a nightmare. He said he saw this massive flash of light, brighter than the sun, and for a split second he thought someone had set off a giant magnesium flare right in front of his face. Then the heat wave hit him. We're talking about temperatures of over 3,000 degrees Celsius. His face, his arms, his legs. Severe burns across the left side of his body. The blast threw him through the air like a rag doll, and when he landed, he was temporarily blinded and deaf. But here's the thing that gets me. When his vision came back, the city was just gone. Buildings that had been there seconds before were now piles of rubble. The sky was black with smoke and debris, and it was completely silent. No screaming, no sirens, nothing. Just this eerie, deathly quiet. He found his 2 colleagues who had kept walking toward the station. They were alive, but badly burned. Together, they spent the night in an air raid shelter, and the next day, Yamaguchi did something that probably seemed logical at the time, but was actually the most unlucky decision in human history. He decided to go home to Nagasaki. Going home to hell, so yeah, picture this. You've just survived the first atomic bomb in human history. You're burned, traumatized, probably in shock. Where do you go? Home. Right. That's exactly what Yamaguchi did. On August 8th, despite his injuries, he managed to catch a train to Nagasaki. The journey took him 17 hours. Can you imagine sitting on a train for 17 hours, with severe radiation burns? But he made it home to his wife Hisako, and their 5-month-old son. Now, here's where the story gets really wild. And honestly, if this was in a movie, people would say it's too unrealistic. Yamaguchi goes to work the next day. August 9th, 1945. His boss at the Mitsubishi shipyard wants to hear about what happened in Hiroshima. So there's Yamaguchi, bandaged up, trying to explain to his boss that an entire city was destroyed by a single bomb. And his boss is looking at him like he's lost his mind. One bomb that destroyed a whole city. Come on, Yamaguchi, that's impossible. They're having this conversation in the office when at exactly 11:02 a.m., Yamaguchi sees another flash of light through the window. The same brightness, the same heat. Fat Man had just detonated over Nagasaki. Lightning strikes twice, okay? So let's pause here for a second, because this is where the story becomes completely unbelievable. This man survived the first atomic bomb, traveled to another city, and then got caught in the second atomic bomb 3 days later. The odds of this happening are basically 0. There were only 2 atomic bombs dropped in human history, 3 days apart, in 2 different cities. And somehow, this one guy was in both places at exactly the wrong time. Or maybe the right time, depending on how you look at it. The Nagasaki blast was actually more powerful than Hiroshima 221 kilotons versus 15 kilotons. But Yamaguchi was further from ground zero this time, about 3 kilometers away. Still close enough to be thrown to the ground, still close enough to be exposed to radiation, but far enough that he wasn't as severely burned. His wife and son were also injured but survived. They spent the next week in a shelter, and then Yamaguchi did something that shows just how tough this guy was. He went back to work. With radiation sickness. In a city that had just been nuked. No one believes the survivor. Here's where the story gets frustrating and sad. For years, decades even, nobody believed Yamaguchi's story. Think about it from their perspective. Some guy claims he was present for both atomic bombings. The only 2 nuclear attacks in human history. Come on. Even official records didn't initially recognize his presence in Hiroshima. The Japanese government had lists of atomic bomb survivors, but Yamaguchi was only on the Nagasaki list. As far as they were concerned, he was just another Nagasaki survivor, making up stories about being in Hiroshima too. His own friends and colleagues were skeptical. Some people thought he was trying to get extra benefits or attention. Others just couldn't wrap their heads around the sheer impossibility of it all. And honestly, can you blame them? It's the kind of story that's so incredible, it almost has to be fake. But Yamaguchi kept telling his story. He kept insisting that yes, he was in both cities. Yes, he survived both bombs. Yes, this actually happened to him. The double survivor. Now here's the thing that makes this even more remarkable. Yamaguchi wasn't just unlucky. He was also incredibly resilient. Despite suffering from radiation exposure twice, despite being burned and traumatized, he lived to be 93 years old. He worked for Mitsubishi for years after the war. He raised his family. He lived a relatively normal life, considering what he'd been through. But he also became an advocate for nuclear disarmament, speaking about his experiences whenever anyone would listen. He would tell people, the reason that I hate the atomic bomb is because of what it does to the dignity of human beings. This guy had seen the worst of what humans could do to each other, and he dedicated part of his life to making sure it never happened again. But still, for most of his life, he was just this old man with an impossible story that nobody could verify. The investigation. Fast forward to the 2000s. Historians and researchers started taking a closer look at atomic bomb survivor records. They were trying to create more complete databases, more accurate historical records. And that's when they started finding evidence that supported Yamaguchi's story. They found his name on employee records in Hiroshima. They found train tickets. They found testimony from his colleagues, who confirmed he was there on business. Slowly but surely, the pieces started falling into place. In 2009, get this, -2009, more than 60 years after the bombings, the Japanese government officially recognized Tsutomu Yamaguchi as a survivor of both atomic bombs. He was 93 years old at the time. Can you imagine waiting 60 years for people to believe you? 60 years of having your story questioned, dismissed, or ignored. And then finally, getting that official recognition. The only one here's what makes Yamaguchi's story even more extraordinary. Researchers have found evidence of about 165 people who were in both cities during the bombings. But Yamaguchi is the only person officially recognized by the Japanese government as a survivor of both attacks. Some of those other people died before they could be properly documented. Others couldn't provide enough evidence. Some probably never even tried to get recognized because they saw how difficult it was. But Yamaguchi persisted. He kept telling his story, kept fighting for recognition, kept believing that the truth would eventually come out. And it did. The human calculator, you know what's wild? Scientists have actually calculated the odds of what happened to Yamaguchi. The chance of being in both Hiroshima and Nagasaki during the atomic bombings. Roughly 1 in several million. But when you factor in surviving both blasts, living through the radiation exposure, making it through the aftermath, and then living for another 65 years, the odds become astronomical. This guy basically won the worst lottery in human history, twice, and then somehow turned it into the best lottery by surviving it all. Some people might call it luck, others might call it fate. But I think it's something simpler than that. I think Tsutomu Yamaguchi was just incredibly, impossibly tough. The message. Before he died in 2010, Yamaguchi gave interviews about his experience. He wasn't bitter, which is remarkable. He wasn't angry at the world for not believing him. Instead, he focused on the message he wanted to share. He said, "It was my destiny that I experienced this twice, and I am still alive to convey what happened." He believed that surviving both bombings gave him a responsibility to tell the world about the reality of nuclear weapons. He described the sound, this low rumbling that seemed to come from everywhere at once. He described the heat, like opening an oven door, but 1,000 times worse. He described the silence afterward, more terrifying than any scream. And he described the people, the burned bodies, the walking wounded, the families searching for loved ones in the rubble. He wanted people to understand that nuclear weapons aren't just political tools or military strategies. They're instruments of unimaginable human suffering. The overlooked history. You know what's crazy? Most people have never heard of Tsutomu Yamaguchi. His story isn't in most history books. It's not taught in schools. This man lived through the most significant military events of the 20th century. Twice, and most people don't even know his name. Maybe it's because his story is so unbelievable that historians didn't want to include it without absolute proof. Maybe it's because focusing on individual survivors takes attention away from the bigger political and military narrative. Or maybe it's just because sometimes history overlooks the most incredible human stories. But I think Yamaguchi's story deserves to be remembered. Not just because it's an amazing tale of survival, but because it puts a human face on events that are often discussed in abstract terms. The ripple effects. Here's something that doesn't get talked about enough. Yamaguchi's survival had ripple effects that lasted generations. His son, who was just a baby during the Nagasaki bombing, grew up to become an engineer too. His grandchildren and great-grandchildren exist because this one man survived 2 nuclear attacks. Every descendant of Tsutomu Yamaguchi represents a victory over the forces that tried to erase human life from those 2 cities. Every child, every grandchild, every great-grandchild is living proof that life finds a way to continue, even after the worst humanity can inflict. The final truth. So here we are. The man who survived both atomic bombs and spent decades having no one believe him. Tsutomu Yamaguchi lived through the worst of human destruction, twice, and used that experience to advocate for peace. His story reminds us that history isn't just about dates and political decisions and military strategies. It's about individual human beings who lived through extraordinary circumstances and somehow found the strength to keep going. The next time someone tells you a story that seems too incredible to be true, remember Tsutomu Yamaguchi. Sometimes reality is stranger than fiction. Sometimes the impossible actually happens. And sometimes the most important stories are the ones that are hardest to believe. Yamaguchi died in 2010, at the age of 93. His last words were reportedly about his hope for a world without nuclear weapons. He had seen what they could do. He had felt their heat, breathed their smoke, walked through their aftermath. And he had survived to tell us about it. If this story amazed you as much as it amazed me, hit that like button and share this video. Let people know about Tsutomu Yamaguchi and his incredible journey of survival. Leave a comment below. What do you think about his story? Do you believe in fate? Or was this just the most incredible string of coincidences in human history? Don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories from history that you've probably never heard about. Because the world is full of remarkable people who live through extraordinary circumstances. And their stories deserve to be told. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the most unbelievable stories are the most important ones to remember.